Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Colin Ferguson. I look after the Prisma Access browser business within Palo Alto Networks for Europe. Just a bit of a backstory to this. I'm not going to give you any product pitches today, but I will explain that the Prisma Access browser is the successful result of an acquisition that Palo Alto made at the beginning of the year of Talon Cybersecurity. I'm a product of that acquisition because I used to work for Talon and now I work for Palo Alto. So today, just sort of 20, 30 minutes, just to take you through a little bit of the story of the unmanaged user problem, why it exists, some of the challenges it's been creating, and then we'll get into a little bit about the best ways, best practices, and how to address it, with zero trust being the center of that conversation. So there's a bit of an unspoken secret in security. I'm not going to ask to do a raise of hands, but I'm curious how many of you actually have assessed how many unmanaged devices you have in your network. Now, Forrester did a very nice piece of work for us, and they identified that actually about 50% of devices in any organization are unmanaged. I've got a better one than that. I was at a bank about a month ago, international bank. CTO of security was sat in front of me and the head of their threat intel team. And I asked, how many unmanaged devices have you got in your bank? And the CTO of security looked at me and said, we're a bank, we've got none. And then the head of threat intel said, actually, we've got 100,000, because he hadn't calculated the mobile devices. But there's all sorts of reasons why there are unmanaged devices, and I'll go through that shortly in a little bit. But that is a significant threat. And in terms of the modern workforce, that's been created by really three groups of usage. The first is what I would call the contractors. 40% of employees are now identifying themselves as contractors in organizations. I suspect it's probably a bit higher in the IT world, actually. BYOD, everybody wants to bring their own devices. My favorite is an executive of a particular customer who demands that he uses his own iPad and that he can work when he's on holiday, and then disclose to us that his kid also plays Roblox on it, which I thought was rather cute. Again, these are real stories and quite scary. And also the use of critical web apps. So obviously, I'm talking to an audience that will be very aware of this. The future is cloud, and the future is cloud apps inside the browser. But that is creating a significant issue for data breaches. And actually about 80% of data breaches are now originating from cloud or browser-based apps. Now, gaps in traditional implementations. So everything we've done today is right, but there is an explicit issue being created on the unmanaged device world. And the reason I show this slide is because I think this is central to the theme of this presentation. I'd love to have this debate, probably not in the big group, but one-on-one maybe. But I don't believe if you have a zero trust strategy, you're achieving that zero trust strategy unless you are dealing with the unmanaged devices. And managed devices, especially if they're 50% of your population, are causing a significant gap in that. Now, again, I particularly like our own research on this one, that 60% of data crucial for network security is not decrypted, which, again, is quite scary. Again, Microsoft did some work as well, our good friends at Microsoft, and 80 to 90% of ransomware attacks are happening on unmanaged devices. These are real stats, and again, if you're an organization of even 1,000 employees and you've got 200 unmanaged devices on there, that is at an inflection point where it's now a significant risk. So the workforce itself, this is where, so I'm not trying to give you nightmares at night, but this is where it gets a little bit more unnerving. So Forrester again did some research. Workers spend 100% of their time, 100% of their day inside the browser. Now that's for all sorts of reasons, but obviously the more applications that end up in the browser, the more time they're going to spend in it. But that browser remains open the whole day, right? But also the worker's day is spent inside the browser. About 85% of their actual activity is inside that browser. So that browser's running the whole time. Now, there are lots and lots of different reasons why people should be working inside a browser and lots of reasons why people shouldn't be. I've actually got two little examples. One of them's my own, which I'm slightly embarrassed about, and one of them's a customer's. So again, this was a banking customer. They wanted their investment bankers to have access to unsanctioned websites. But they can't actually do that because it's against their compliance or it creates a significant risk. But they have to do it because those bankers need access to those websites. Now, again, on unmanaged devices, that hits a risk register. Now, one of the reasons it hits a risk register is the story that I'll tell you. So my wife sent me on WhatsApp a registration form for my son's Scouts that I had to fill out. So I downloaded it. It was a Word document. And because it's a Word document, it automatically uploaded into my daughter's school's Teams account. Right? Now, that's fine because it's not really that critical. It's my son's Scouts. It's my daughter's Teams account. But what had that been if my colleague had sent me a data file full of customer data and I'd uploaded that into my own Google account, or worse still, another company's Google account, or I uploaded a malicious file by accident into my work Teams account or my work Google workspace. So that the real life working of people inside the browser, combined with the fact it's unmanaged, is creating a significant problem. Now, the traditional approaches. This isn't a criticism of traditional approaches. This is just a reality of the way the market's matured. So we started off with multi-factor authentication, putting in proxies, all very well and good, very low cost, basic level of security. We moved that up over time, implemented VDI approaches and RBI. By the way, I remember having VDI back in 2001, and I hated it then. So, and my wife still uses VDI in the house, and I can tell by the noises coming out of her study that she hates it as well. But then there's also the shipping of devices. So I used to work for an EDR company before I worked for Talon and then Paolo, and their motion very much was, if you've got an unmanaged device, make it managed. But that's hugely expensive, and it's also not guaranteed that you'll ever get that device back. So there's a lot of devices that then get sort of cleared out and moved around the market. But that's where we come to. But even those don't go to a full level of security, and I certainly wouldn't suggest that you're achieving zero trust if you're just implementing a VDI environment. So, unlock the opportunity with a secure browser, right? So in securing that browser, you can start to think about the opportunity of use cases that you can deploy in your organization that probably you weren't able to before. The first one, third parties and contractors, that's probably the most common phone call that I get. We've got third parties, we've got contractors, we've got agency workers. If you're an automotive company, we've got dealers, or M&As as well. So when I was acquired by Paolo, they didn't have a browser, secure browser, of course, because they just bought one. Had they, I could have just logged onto their secure browser and I'd be in their systems. But ultimately, that's the most common use case, and the volume of contractors does tend to be quite high in organizations. The second one, BYOD, is a lot of organizations have been reluctant to deliver genuine BYOD initiatives, but that can be achieved with secure browsing as well, but also with the benefit of getting rid of VDI. And then the final one on the right-hand side is there's quite a lot of what I would call advanced use cases that you can use with secure browsing. So there's the concept, and I'll talk a little bit about last mile DLP, but you can start to monitor insider threats. You can get telemetry from the browser. You can start to use it in your threat hunting. Many years ago, I used to work for a SIM provider, and one of the biggest challenges that we had in the estate was we could never get information from unmanaged devices. They were just a black hole to us, so we had no idea what was going on. But if you can implement a secure browser, you can start to get that telemetry as well. And no presentation today would be complete without some sort of AI message, but the use of AI in organizations is, especially on unmanaged devices, is extremely scary. One of the things, if you can implement a secure browsing technologies, you can start to put some policies and guardrails around that, allowing some users to use it, others not, etc., etc. So the last sort of section of this presentation, I wanted to talk about how you can start to define requirements and capabilities inside your organization for this. One thing I would very much recommend that you think about is when you're looking at the unmanaged device problem or you're looking at secure browsing, you approach this as a capability as opposed to what I call a just-in-time requirement. So whenever I've seen just-in-time requirements, it's normally too late. And I have also seen in talking to customers people deploying a lot of tactical point level solutions for a particular use case or a particular problem. If you're going to go down this road, my advice would be think about this as a broader set of capabilities. I look at it as three functions, really. The first is securing that environment and what that entails, and I'll talk more about this momentarily. The second is implementing those last mile data and identity controls. How are you integrating with single sign-on? What sort of controls are you trying to achieve inside the browser? And then the third thing is that user-first workspace. Now, I would argue that there are other technologies out there in the marketplace that do different things around securing browsing. RBI is one. I would argue that not all of them are covering all three of those simultaneously. That they're addressing certain particular things, which is why I think customers have tended to come at this from a point in time, or I've got to have this element of the requirements fixed, but I'll leave all the others and trade those off. So just a little bit of a cheat sheet for you in terms of what you might want to start thinking about. Isolating that workspace. How do I harden it and add that additional layer of encryption? What am I going to protect against? Am I going to protect against keyloggers, untrusted certificates, all the public networks, etc.? Again, AI put in there, applying AI. How am I going to use AI on that secure workspace? And my personal favorite further down the line is that logging for threat detection and threat hunting. I think that's really quite key. The second piece in the middle is not insignificant either, which is that last mile data controls. Now, I was explaining to someone earlier in the day, one thing about secure browsing, and if you're doing this in the right way, is you can start to implement certain policies on certain applications or certain websites to certain users, right? So if you think about that, if I'm on a trusted website, a corporate application, let's say my M365 application, and I screenshot something on that application, I can't then go copy and paste that in an unsanctioned website. That's the sort of last mile data protection you want to start implementing. Or on a certain application, I'm going to watermark that application. Or I'm just going to hash out personal information if I'm in a CRM or something. Had another customer, this one in Italy, and they're a retailer, and they've outsourced their call center. Now, that call center is effectively a virtual call center. It's individuals at home. Now, they were accessing their CRM via VDI. They have a VIP list of customers. There was absolutely no control in place to stop any one of those outsourced agents, other than a signed disclaimer in a third-party agreement, that they could download all of that information or copy and paste all that information, put it into an Excel file, and then off it goes, straight into a Google Workspace. Again, if you're implementing the types of policies that you want to implement, you can prevent all of that from happening. And then the third piece is that user-first environment. Now, I think this is the thing that gets overlooked the most. I think there's a belief in the marketplace that there is a trade-off with user experience and secure browsing that is acceptable. All right, let's harden everything down, let's lock everything down, let's implement these policies, and if it runs slow and the users don't like it, that's kind of tough, right? That's the trade-off. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case. So think about the onboarding and offboarding, what experience you want that to have. The classic thing is, are you going to allow them to install a browser without admin rights? I know some people might think that's crazy, but actually that's probably one of the most common objections anyone ever gives to implementing something on their own device. And then if you think about that policy engine itself, how are you going to define that policies? Is it going to be a usable experience for administrators, or are you going to have to hire a team of people to manage this capability? You obviously want to avoid the latter. Now, the last thing on this, or the last two things on this, the first is that ZTNA integration. I'll talk about that in my next slide. I personally think that is fundamental to everything in this. And then the second thing is cost of change. You need to think carefully about, in implementing any capability, what that cost of change is going to be. Our customers tell us it's got to be under 6 months if it's going to get signed off, and that's worked well for us. But you don't want to be implementing a big monolithic capability if it's going to take you 12 months plus to as a roadmap, because that's going to just drive up the cost of change. But on ZTNA integration, so again, I said at the beginning of the session, you can't achieve zero trust without covering the unmanaged. I would actually also argue you can't achieve zero trust if you're just deploying a secure browser in isolation of your ZTNA strategy. So what we would certainly recommend on all of this is you think about, okay, how am I going to integrate with my ZTNA provider, and what's my SASE strategy in all of this? Now, obviously, Palo Alto has a ZTNA product in Prisma Access, but there are others available. And you want to think about, is that going to be a seamless integration? Are you going to be able to leverage the capability that you've already delivered for Zero Trust inside the browser? If you're deploying these as two completely separate projects or two separate capabilities, I think there's going to be a missed trick in that at some point, and it's going to unravel. Or overlap, which is also going to be challenging as well. Okay, how am I doing for time? Because I'm quite early, aren't I? After I've blistered through that, I might be able to give you some time back or answer any questions. But key takeaways on that. So I would, again, I think I've said this a few times, think about this as a capability. I call this my Captain Obvious slide because I think it is kind of obvious, but again, probably worth restating, which is, first off, identify what the profile of those users are on Unmanaged. So the first question is obviously how many have I got, but who have got them? What type of, what roles are they doing? What systems are they accessing, etc. If you're in a situation where you've got global coverage as well, manufacturing is a key example of this. If you've got people in China and you've got people in South America, etc., you're going to want to consider how many of those are on Unmanaged. Not to say that they're necessarily threat actors or insiders themselves, but they're very susceptible to that on an unmanaged device. And then identify that quantity and risk. And I think that's important. In building any business case for any capability, you're going to have to quantify that risk. But I do believe the market is now at an inflection point where the unmanaged risk in an organization is starting to appear on risk registers. We're hearing that from customers already. That bank I referred to earlier with their investment bankers trying to access unsanctioned websites, they are doing that now, and that is on their risk register. So that's a real life example. Prioritize the use cases and use case adoption. Again, that's like with any project, but think about which use cases you want to lock down first and secure first. And then define the ZTNA integration and how that's going to play out with your Zero Trust environment. And all part of that will be then building those capabilities. But certainly, very keen to talk to you after the session. We're over on the stand at the Palo Alto stand. If you've got any questions now, I'm very happy to answer them. Don't get too technical, because I might have to pass and send you to one of our technologists, but happy to address anything today. Thank you very much.